Hi, John.
Good morning. Hi, everybody. So if you don't live here, we had a bit of snow.
Little.
So I don't know how much you can see through the blinds here. They're semi-opaque. It's settled a little bit, but when I came in on Friday, it was about at the halfway point of the door. And I know we shoveled a little bit, and I'm just so thankful for the donors who donated snow melt on our walk. I can't tell you how thrilled I was again this year. But the interesting thing about this snow is it shows you how quickly things can change. So a conversation that we may have had a week or two ago would be the lack of snow, would be the possibility of it being a drought year. Questions like, what will our farmers do? How will the crops fare? Who has the water rights to what little is there? The conversation is switched to, could this be a flood year? Will there be so much abundance that that house on the river maybe wasn't the best choice to make? Or I know there's at least a couple houses on the river here that bought house donuts. You know what those are? Where you put these inflatable, I'm assuming they're inflatable things around your house. I remember our last flood, they had a picture in the paper of one of them of, the high waters, and they're just kind of like the houses in the donut. So it's interesting how quickly the conversation can change. It's interesting how we can go from a conversation of great lack to what in the world are we going to do with all this abundance? And what is my role in all this as things have changed? And so I think that certainly is a metaphor just for life at all. It's a metaphor for our country conditions, our world conditions. That there's actually, I think, there's two ideas in my head. On one part of my brain, it seems like nothing is changing, that we're a bit stuck. And on the other hand, it seems like, no, we are actually having some pretty rapid change and developments. And certainly even with things like elections, whether you like the result of an election or not, it's a pretty big change. Pretty big change, of course. And again, you may like it, you may not like it. But in that big change, again, how are we stuck? Where do we seem to have trouble moving forward? How, I think, of course, in our stuckness, is that a word, when can I just go to the movies and not have to go online to go to the movies kind of thing? It's like of wanting life to be familiar somehow. Well, in all this, like I said, we can never say why or how something showed up. And I know that we like to believe that we can. We like to say, well, there must be some karmic thing for all this happening, or there's a deity up high that has sent this our way because we were bad, or we need a lesson, or whatever. We have no idea of the why, but we are charged with what are we going to do with it. That's the business always at hand, especially in this huge portion of the program historically that we're in right now. What are we going to do with it? What is our individual roles? What would I like to say years from now that how I stepped up a little bit and helped the healing of the planet as opposed to just decided to be a spectator? What is it you want to do? And I think a lot, that can certainly vary a lot. But what I think this time is about, of many things, is a renewed connection. It's about no longer being estranged from life in some ways, or even people we think that we see all the time that we really don't know or have a connection to. That just being in close proximity with someone doesn't mean that you're making the effort for a connection. Here's a great example of that. So usually right after Labor Day in most years, and this is not what I would call most years, we just come off a summer here in Sun Valley. And if you don't live here, if you haven't been here during the summer, you know that there is an enormous amount of things that you can do. And in fact, going into Labor Day is almost like sliding into home, like, oh my God, I can't believe I made it here. And there's always this look of people, of disheveled look of, oh my God, thank God summer's over. I can finally rest a little bit. And part of my talk will be in September of coming back to balance. Coming back into yourself a little bit. That that part of this, as fun as it was, we had great human interaction, and I think that was really low on actual connection. And what many of us start to crave after all that, just being with people and active in a certain way of being connected in a more significant way. And so, as we talk about this time of year and how we miss being with people in a certain physical way, it's a time that we can look at our connection and ask, how can I promote that in my life? And a good way to do this is look at where you are longing for connection right now. And rather than sit by your cell phone and say, I want it to ring, I want it to ring, I want it to ring, what if you made the phone call? Because have you ever, I've done this before, you get so like embittered in your own, like, why don't people notice what I'm doing or what I'm doing, or why don't they call me? And I say, well, when did I pick up the phone? And so, I think I had mentioned this before, I'm starting a volunteer position with Centers of Spiritual Living, and it's not in place of what I'm doing here at Light in the Mountains, it's just a volunteer position. And it's position of a regional support coordinator. And what this means, and so it's about 13 of them in Central Spiritual Living, is that I will have about 40 ministries that my job is to make a connection with them. That to have Zoom calls and phone calls and just to see what they're up to and if they're having difficulties to try to support them in that. And what that came out of is that I was starting to feel a little, I don't know, what's the word? I don't know, bitter, upset. Because I thought, we've been here for 33 years at Light in the Mountains and no one ever gives us a phone call. Does anyone even know we're here? If we went out of business, would anyone notice? And again, it was like, gee, when are they going to call? When are they going to call? When are they going to call? I thought, oh, maybe I should make the call. So that's what I figured out, is that if I want more connection in my professional life here, that maybe since I'm the one that's noticed that it's lacking, that I should be the one to start it off a little bit more deeply. Not to say that it's not happening at all. So how can you increase connection in your life? And if you are not feeling it in a certain way, how can you, in a sense, serve someone else and know that if you serve someone else in that area, you're going to be served? That's how it works. That's how this really law of circulation works. You put it out and it comes right back to you. So let's look at really at the connections that we can make right now and really what, I don't know, the possibilities for right now. It's so easy to look at the things that just aren't working. And we could make a list. I mean, I'm tired of the list, aren't you? But how about making a list of really what's up for healing and what's up for transformation and how each of us individually can play a significant role as we look at connections. So this week I had a great Zoom call with some of my fellow colleague ministers in Center Spiritual Living in a completely different category than the one I just talked about in the volunteer role that I'm going to do. And we were talking about connections in different ways. And the person leading the phone call, I really related to because she was making several analogies pertaining to when she was a salesperson. And which I was a salesperson in the 90s. That, I had a territory and there was a product I was selling. I worked for a hair product company and I went to salons all over a certain part of LA. And I don't know what she did, but she did something really quite similar. And just talking about the psychology of sales and how it's not about selling stuff, it's about connection. And you aren't a successful salesperson because you sell things. You are a successful salesperson because you have made a connection with people. And how this is really the analogy for us to use in everything. So it's so funny, and it brought back these memories. The employers that I have, it was a married couple, a man and a woman, and they were polar opposites in their philosophy around sales. So one of them was really kind of old school sales. Like I said, I think I've said this before, his thing was, you can't let these other salespeople eat your lunch. You got to go in there. If you don't sell it, someone else is going to sell it. And the other thing, which was, she pointed out on the call, another thing was that don't leave money on the table. In other words, you're supposed to go in there with all all things going, all pistons running in your sales meetings, and you knew that what they said they had to spend wasn't their whole budget, and that you couldn't leave any of that money on the table because those other salespeople would come and eat your lunch. They would take what's on the table if you didn't. And so it didn't matter if they needed the stuff. You just needed to come out with the big sale. And of course, in that way of thinking, and of course this is, again, look at the analogies of life. When we think about scarcity, we just go out and there's not much thoughtfulness. There's no connection to this. But the other thing in this type of sales is it's very fear-based. It's very based on scarcity. And part of my experience was that I worked pretty much out of my home. We had salespeople that had districts all over California, but we would once a month have a full-day meeting at the head office, and people would fly in and drive in or whatever. And if you had, in a sense, made the big sales, you were like going into the meeting and the triumphant entry. Yes, I have meted and exceeded all my goals of this month. And of course, you were patted on the back. And everybody even knew before the meeting who had done that. But there was the downside of if you didn't meet your goals. I mean, you kind of walked in, with your tail between your legs kind of thing. And people knew ahead of time that, John didn't make that goal this month. In fact, 2 months in a row, he didn't. And so there was this dread of going into the sales meeting. And of course, the further dread of going to the office with the guy having to tell you that someone ate your lunch. And of course, when you go into fear in sales or in life, it starts to collapse upon itself. You cease thinking about what is a greater good, or what is the connection. What, if I have a service to offer, what do people actually need? You lose that. It starts to collapse upon itself. And you just got, God, I need to make something happen here. And I think now with our frustration in life, we can fall into that, oh my God, who's eating my lunch? And things aren't working. It's just, my life is imploding on myself. The life in our country is imploding on ourselves. And we get to that point that we can't do anything or not make a right move. So there was another way to look at that profession I used to have in sales. And this was represented by the other partner. It wasn't just about what you were selling, it was about making a relationship. And it was about the long game, not making the big hit of a sale. It was about going into any meeting with this idea that you were there to be of service to them and to help them make their business more successful. And knowing that in this large list of things that you had that you could sell to them in both goods and services, that probably not every one was right for them. But there was probably some that was absolutely perfect for where they were in their evolution of their business. And in fact, there might be even one thing in particular that can make a big difference if not only they had it in their business, but you were there to mentor them along the way. And knowing that as that worked, you became their partner, and that you could slowly layer things with your relationship with them over the years and develop a trust that at some point you came in and if you just said, I think this new thing we had would really work for you, there'd be no discussion. You had a relationship, you had a connection, and that in trust, and that it wasn't about the sales, it was about the connection. And of course, if the businesses were successful, you as a salesperson were successful. So where are you going to make the connections? And a great example in my career as a salesperson. So one of the, and I really got from that one boss how to be of service and to make connection. So they had a really great hair color line. And when I worked behind the chair as a hairdresser, that was my specialty. I could turn a big mess into something that wasn't a mess. And so in this idea of partnership, my employers were really amazed. In about a year's time, I increased hair color sales by 1,000%. That's a lot, if you don't know. That's really a lot, 1,000%. How did I do that? I didn't say, here's a box of product. See you later. I taught them how to use it. Sometimes I would, even though I needed to see clients, I would book like 4 or 5 hours at a place and just sit there and show them how to use it, customer after customer. And it seemed like in the short run that I was missing out on some other things. But I made the connection. And that relationship again, after I showed them how to be successful in that, they would trust me in just about anything. So it wasn't about selling stuff. It was about making a connection. So I would say that we're really needing connection today. And even liking it to my sales career, as my first boss would say, you know, don't leave money on the table. There's a lot of money on the table right now. There's a lot of potentiality on the table. There is the possibility of great healing on the table right now. There is so much things on the table right now that we're leaving there because we don't trust, or we don't think it's worth our while, or not worth our effort, that, oh, well, I tried this before, or look at those quote-unquote crazy people on TV. And, of course, depending on who you are and your opinions, you have a different group of who you think are the crazy people. But look at those people. You know, we could never have connection or healing with them, could we? But you start where you are. And you also realize that it is, again, for the long game. It's not like, gee, I called my, I don't know, brother-in-law who I had a fight with, and after 10 seconds of it, he hung up with me. I guess I can't do that again. Well, it's the long game. Where are you going to start? And also, and even if you are feeling things are doing well, or just like, let's say you really are pleased with the results of the election. It doesn't mean that the long game is done for you and that you're able to pawn it off on someone else. In fact, I've probably spoken to about 15 people in the last 2 weeks who were pleased with the election that says, phew, I'm so glad I don't have to give my attention to this anymore. Really? It's the long game of consciousness. It's the long game of asking ourselves, like in our Science of Mind philosophy, of what is your mental equivalent, meaning what do you believe is possible for you, your family, and your country? And that as we grow in consciousness, we need to expand what we believe in possible, what is possible. What we believe is, in a sense, the money on the table that we can help bring forth into in our families and our country. How are you willing to grow that? One last great story about this is that your work isn't done. If you're happy with things the way they're starting to go now, it's not even close to being done. So I met a colleague of mine several years ago at one of our conventions. She had been a minister for quite some time. And she shared with me her first, I guess, big job. Meaning that, like here, I went through a long process of where we jokingly said we were dating when deciding we were going to get married. In other words, are you going to hire me? And she was going through that process. She said it was like this magic carpet ride. Like all these dreams and visions she had of being a clergy person with Central Spiritual Living, you know, teaching Science of Mind. It just seemed like this was coming true. There's such a connection with these people as she was going through this, 3 or 4 month period of interviews and visiting and seeing who they were and they seeing who she was. And she said her first Sunday was like one of the best days of her life. I mean, the house was full and people were celebrating. They catered in lunch and it was amazing. And she said, but then something happened at the end that was almost like, if you read like the foreshadowing of things to come. The board president just quietly came over to her and says, here are the keys. She says, oh, okay, well, see you tomorrow. So she showed up the next day. The door was locked. Oh, I guess I'm the first one here. So she let herself in, and she had been shown where her office was, but not really sure what was going on or the day-to-day operations. And she kind of, sat around for a couple hours and said, gee, when do people show up? And nobody was showing up. And about lunchish time, she called the board president. He says, well, when do people come? He says, well, Nobody comes. This is yours now. And she said that afternoon, the day before were tears of joy. On Monday were tears of sadness. That she saw what her work was. That it is such a great metaphor that we think that we've accomplished something and it's time to hand over the keys. When actually, that's when the work begins. And that's when she saw what the real work was in her spiritual community, to make it truly a spiritual community. That it wasn't just handed over to her. So it's really easy to just check out. It's really easy to say, well, I made my attempts at making connections. It's the long game. There's a tremendous amount of stuff on the table right now. And how we will remember this point in history will be, to what extent did we decide to take advantage of it? So let's just go with it for right now. And first, I express my gratitude for this amazing day, for this amazing abundance that shows up as snow. This amazing abundance that shows up as joy on our community as we celebrate it. And my gratitude for people stepping forward to simply make connections. And I know, too, that we look within ourselves and we go to the depths of our being and to the top and bottom of our heart, looking for guidance and receiving guidance on what is ours to do. Knowing it shows up in many ways, but at the heart of it is our connections. That each of us are willing to be the ones to step forward. Each one of us are willing to be the ones to step forward when it seems like the journey is tiring us out. We commit to the long game. We see and we know, and we know right now that there's tremendous possibility on the table right now. We feel it as something that is alive, that is coursing through our veins as an individual and as a people, that we see it, we feel it, we envision it, and we allow it to come forth through us in any way that's appropriate, knowing that it's not just a possibility but an inevitability. That we say yes at a deep level. We allow the greater good to come forward, and for it to come forward through and as us. So I give thanks for this, and in this thanksgiving and in this commitment for us all, I simply release it. I let it go. I let this affirmation be released and received in the heart and mind to spirit, and know that as we lovingly let it go, miracles happen. And so it is.